Okay, I know that you guys are paying attention. That's a good sign. I love coming to the house of God just to worship God every Sunday morning. It's just a good place that we can relax and be with other Christians, fellowship, and just talk about God and learn together. And so I'm glad that you guys could be here this morning. Obviously, Joel is not up here, as we have said a few times already this morning. So you guys get to enjoy church with me this morning, and I hope that you do enjoy church with me this morning. So let's get into our word here. We've been plugging through a series the last few weeks. It's been entitled Extreme Makeover Church Edition. As we're going through this, we've been going through the book of Colossians, which is a pretty extreme book in the Bible. If we were going to do an extreme makeover edition, this is a good book to start looking in, because Paul throws some pretty radical ideas out there, some things that really stretch the early day church. And what I encourage you guys to do this morning and as we go through this series is start to try and stretch your mind. Kind of step out of your comfort zone and start thinking, where is Jesus taking us today? And the question that we've been going through is Jesus enough? And when I was preparing for the sermon, I thought, I'm going to one-up Joel and walk up in front of you guys and just say, yes, Jesus is enough. That's the end of my sermon, and everybody can go home. But instead, I figured, maybe I'll actually write a sermon, and we'll go through this and plug through this together. Joel did a really good job last week, I think, kind of setting the bar, setting the mood of where the early church was and where Paul was bringing them. And what I'm going to try and do this morning is kind of close off the second chapter of Colossians. So in verse 16, when it says, "Therefore do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, Sabbath day." And in verse 17 it says, "These are a shadow of the things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ." What I really got from this when I was reading it was this: peer pressure. When it's talking about, in verse 16, "Therefore do not let anybody judge you by what you eat or drink or what you do," I kind of got this feel, is that Paul is saying, don't put up with anyone pressuring you into details of diet, worship services, or holy days. And that all these things are a distraction from what truly matters, which is Christ. So he's calling us to look past the distractions, look past the peer pressure of things that people put before us and say, well, this is really important. Well, this is more important than that. And what he's saying is that, yes, these things are important, but Christ is more important than all of those things. That we should stay focused and looking towards Christ as to where does he want us to be. Then it continues in verse 18, "Do not let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you. Such a person also goes into great detail about what they have seen. They are puffed up with idle notions by their unspiritual mind." Then it continues on, verse 19. "They have lost connection with the head, from whom the whole body, supported and held together by its ligaments and sinews, grows as God causes it to grow." I love this verse. This verse actually really makes me think about, what is he trying to say to them? And this is what I got. Don't tolerate people who try to run your life, ordering you to bow or scrape, insisting that you join their obsession with angels, and that you seek out visions. Then he uses a funny term. They are puffed up. I really actually think that this is very humorous that he uses the term, they are puffed up. And my translation of "they are puffed up" is "they are full of hot air." That's what Paul's coming to say, is that they're full of hot air. Don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. They've lost connection with Christ, and they're full of themselves, and they think they know everything. Now, we all here have experienced somebody in our life that thinks that they know everything. And what he's saying is steer clear from that and stay focused on Christ through that. Then he continues on verse 20, since you died with Christ to the elemental spiritual forces of this world, why, as though you still belong to the world, do you submit to its rules? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. Verse 22, these rules, which have to do with things that are all destined to perish with use, are based on merely human commands and teachings. Such regulations indeed have an appearance of wisdom, with their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body, but they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence. This is what I got from those few verses there. Paul's coming and kind of closing off what he's trying to say. He says, so then, with Christ we put all religion behind you. Why do you let yourselves be bullied by it? Don't touch this, don't taste that, don't go near this. Do you think things that are here today and gone tomorrow are worth that kind of attention? Such things sound impressive by the appearance of wisdom, but they're just another way of showing off, making yourselves look important. Now, I used to be really talented when I was a kid. I'm a little bit less talented now at making myself look smarter than what I am. Now I'm just really smart, so I don't have to make myself look smarter than what I am. But when I was a kid, I could I could turn a lie into a truth just by making it sound good. Just by being confident in what I believed, but it wasn't necessarily true. And I know a lot of people that are very skilled at this, that know that something's not true, but know that if they feel confident and if it sounds good enough, then you'll believe it. And I've seen it happen on TV, I've seen it happen in the media, I've seen it happen in my family. This is what we could do. This is the power that we have. This is the power of our tongue, our word. And what Paul's saying is that this is everywhere you go. There's peer pressure. There's people who are leading you astray. And we could sit there and focus on these things. But what he's saying is, you know what, instead of that, let's focus on Christ. Last week, I was very impressed on Joel's use of technology. So I brought it back out again. I figured that I would use it again this week for you guys. Our pastor leading us into the 21st century. If I can figure out how to use it. Last week, he laid out this cool diagram. I'll draw it, and then I'll move out of the way. He drew a box, and he put God in the middle. And what he said, I'm going to call this Joel's box of religion, because he did such a good job last week. And what this is our four walls that we put up around God and say, we can put God in this box, we can understand him. See, my understanding of religion growing up was it was a man-made thing. That people put God in this box so that we could wrap our minds around him, understand him, say this is what God can and can't do, and get a handle on who God is, because we can't leave things to the unknown. As people, as natural just instincts, we need to be in control. We need to know what's going on. We have to be in the loop. And the reality is that too many times, God doesn't let us in the loop. He doesn't let us into the box. He doesn't let us know what's going on. But that's okay because God's in control. And what I always found is that this box is trying to put God under control. It's trying to put him into a box and say, okay, we got a handle on this. We know what's going on. We can control this. So what Joel did afterwards was he changed it. He had Jesus up here and an arrow. And what he said is that this is what Jesus called us to. Come and follow me. Now, boxes, rectangles, squares, that reminds me of geometry. I didn't do so well in high school. And geometry reminds me of math or equations. So to me, the box method is an equation. It's, okay, this side plus this side plus this side equals salvation. But Jesus tells us, no, that's not what I want to do. Come, follow me. So what he does is he takes it from an equation and he turns it into an action or emotion, which is different. We're not looking at math anymore. We're not looking at an equation anymore. But I want to take this one step further this morning. Because see, Paul says, there's one more thing that's thrown in our path. And when we're moving towards Jesus, there's an issue. These things keep on popping up. Little things that pop in our way, somebody that, maybe doesn't like us, finances aren't working out, can't figure something out, we get held back a grade, anything. And what we do is we start focusing on these little things. So although we start here, we start focusing on this. And when you're focusing on something, when you're driving, for example, if you're driving to a destination, you are looking at that destination. If I'm driving to Ad, I'm looking at Ad and going towards Ad. I can't be going towards Ad and driving to his wife over here. That's not physically possible. So what happens is when we lose focus on Christ and we start focusing on these other things, we start driving towards them. And now what this looks like, instead of an easy motion towards Jesus, we start playing connect the dots. That looks like a mess. That is not what Jesus called us to do. That is not where Jesus wants us to be. And sometimes it's difficult to see past some of the things that we have in our life, some of the struggles or things that people are saying or different things that are going on in our life, to be able to see past those things and to really look towards Jesus. But what Jesus is saying is that he never said that life is going to be easier. He never said that, hey, become a Christian, follow me, and you are going to be set for life. He said, come, follow me, and you will be persecuted. There will be things that will pop up in your life, but if you stay focused on Jesus, he's going to help you through those situations. He's going to help you drive right on past those different things. And so I started thinking, what does being focused on Christ actually look like? And I remembered this movement that happened in the mid-90s. I was born in 87, so I don't remember when it started, but I remembered a little bit later. There was this big movement called WWJD. Has everybody here heard of WWJD? Stands for What Would Jesus Do? It started as a youth movement out of the States. And the idea is that on a daily basis, we could look at situations in our life and ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? We see it wasn't the words WWJD or what would Jesus do that really made this campaign effective. What they did is they said, we don't just want to have a lip service here and say, okay, this is what we want to do. It was the execution that made it very popular. And what they did is they came out with these wristbands that you could put on your wrist. Now, what does that do? Every day that you deal with a situation, if you look down at your wrist, you would see this wristband that said, what would Jesus do? And it would remind you in that situation, what would Jesus do? It was a daily reminder that we are Christians, we are called to follow Jesus. Now, what does that look like? It was a very powerful and effective thing. But then what came in is people started coming in and changing the acronym WWJD into other things, worldly things, very inappropriate things, and it kind of lost steam. But throughout the years, I've always thought, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? And I see myself coming into these situations, sometimes, not all the time, but most of the time, thinking, in this moment, what would Jesus do? In the last few weeks, I've had situations, family issues that have come up, and I've had to think, what would Jesus do in this situation? And the reality is, most of the time, it's not the easy decision. It's a difficult decision, but that's when you really see fruit come out of your labor. I started to think of a story, something that happened to me of when I was most focused in my life. Katie and I have been married for a little over 3 years. It's been 3 years, correct? I'm not lying. A little over 3 years. I remember the day before our wedding, we were getting everything ready. You see, my beautiful wife, who loves me very much, allowed me to do what I wanted for our wedding reception. So what I did was actually a survivor wedding reception. And what we did with this is true. What we did with the people is we actually split them up into teams, and we did these survivor challenges with them. One was they got a case of water. They had to drink all the water and make a floating raft in the pool. And this was our wedding reception. I'm just a big kid, okay? That's all I am. And she allowed me to do this, so we decided to do a barbecue/pool party kind of feel for our reception. We're not dress-up people. We just kind of like to be relaxed, casual. That's what we enjoy. And so the day before, we had all these things that we had to do. I had to make the hamburgers. We had to clean the yard. We were doing it in her parents' side yard, so I had to get the tents, get them set up, clean the pool, do all these things, and I was just completely overwhelmed. The day before, I completely forgot I was getting married. Completely forgot I was getting married because I had so many things on my plate that I actually had to do. And we were actually so busy that we decided to send Katie out to go get McDonald's because that's just the easy choice to do for food, or what we call food anyways. So she went to McDonald's to go get us food and left me with my nephew and her nephew. So I had to watch these two boys, and they were, like 5 at the time, roughly 4, 3, something around that age. They were young, about yay high, okay? If you can go off of that, they were about that tall. So just little guys, and we were outside playing, and I'm like, okay, I got to get these burgers done. I got to go inside, get this under control. So I told the boys, okay, go inside and play. I got to go inside and take care of this. So I went inside, sat down, got all the stuff for the burgers ready, started making my patties, and all of a sudden, but it must have been like 4 or 5 minutes later, her nephew came running up to the screen door and said, your nephew decided to go for a swim. At the time, I was really confused at what he was saying. I'm like, okay, I don't understand what you just said. And I walked out onto the porch, and when I looked in the pool, all I saw was water splashing everywhere, and I realized that he was not able to swim. So in a panic, I ran and jumped in the pool and grabbed him and pulled him out. And I could see that his lips were turning blue. So in a panic, I started doing CPR, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And then I saw his eyes close. And it was just a very silent, still moment at that time that I was holding him in my arms. And somebody had said, run next door, because at the time, Katie's aunt was living next door, and she used to be a paramedic. And so I got up and I ran as fast as I could next door, and she happened to be home, and I said, come quick. She stopped what she was doing. She came, ran quick. By the time that we had gotten back, his face was blue, and his jaw was starting to seize up. And so she was directing me as to what to do, and she went down beside him, and she started doing CPR. I remember holding him in my arms in that moment and seeing that there was no life there, that he was dead. She continued doing CPR, and all of a sudden, he coughed. He started to spit up water. I remember sitting next to him and just holding him and hearing him cry. Shortly after, the ambulance came, and him and I jumped into the ambulance, and we started going to the hospital. The ironic thing is, when I was in the ambulance driving, Katie was actually driving past us with the McDonald's. And she always thinks she hates driving by ambulances because she always thinks there's somebody in there she knows. Ironically enough, her husband-to-be was in that ambulance. I remember the whole way going to the hospital, Kevin kept on looking up at me and saying, am I going to get to go to your wedding tomorrow? Am I going to get to go to your wedding tomorrow? I'm like, buddy, just don't worry about that. We'll worry about you. It's all okay. We got to the hospital, and the doctor comes in. He starts checking his breathing. He still had a little bit of water in his lungs. He said to the doctor, when can I leave? I have to go to Uncle Shane and Auntie Katie's wedding. And the doctor's like, I don't know if you're going to be able to leave. And he started to cry. He said, no, I need to go to Uncle Shane and Auntie Katie's wedding. I'm supposed to stand in their wedding. This is very important. My family showed up, and they said, you know, Shane, you got a lot to get ready for the wedding. You should probably take off. And I said, no, this is important. He needs me here right now. And I stayed with him. You know what the funny thing is? I went home that night, Woke up the next morning, and Katie and I got married. And everything went off without a hitch. We didn't have any issues. And the amazing thing is, the hospital decided to release Kevin just so that he could come and stand in our wedding. By the way, at the reception, he showed up and saw the pool and asked if he could go swimming. Which that was kind of my reaction. Well, we'll see. We'll see a little bit later maybe. We'll check that out. But I remember the entire time, I was getting married the next day. I had so much to do, but I was focused on him, and he was focused on me. And there was some sort of a connection, some sort of a bond. And when I started thinking of this, I thought, this is the focus that God wants us to have on him. See, because there was a sense of urgency. There was a sense of this needs to happen right now. This is the most important thing in my life at this moment. And I think that that's what God calls us, is that we need to stay focused on him with that sense of urgency. That although there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of people that we care about, we love a lot of people, and there's tons of stuff going on. But if we can stay that focused on Christ, where would we be as a body? What things could we accomplish? If every person in this room was that focused on Jesus, I think that a lot of stuff would change on a day-to-day basis. I remember going out to coffee with a pastor friend, and he was telling me about this book that he was reading, and it was this guy, and there's a lot of books like this. There was this guy, and what he wanted to do is he wanted to find God in the church. So what he did, and he wasn't a Christian himself, and he traveled across North America into different denominations, different churches, met with different people. And by the end of the book, this was his conclusion. He had said, I don't believe in heaven or hell, but I believe in God. And in an interview, they said, why don't you believe in heaven or hell? Why don't you believe in these places? And he said, in all the churches and all the places that I've been to and all the people that I've talked to, it didn't seem that there was an urgency. It didn't seem that people were passionate about their loved ones that were going to this place called hell. And he said, I actually don't even know if these Christians believe in hell themselves. Because if they did, they would think that it would be a lot more important to start saving these people and bringing them to Christ. Now, obviously, he never came to this church, and we obviously know that. But it really started to get me thinking is that, how often do I think about that? You see, one of the enemy's strategies is that out of sight, out of mind. And if we don't think about these things and have those things on our plate, on our mind on a daily basis, then we can't effectively utilize them and start pulling people to Christ. My summer project for this youth group was just to build relationships with people. That was it. My first 2 Friday nights I came, we had 1 youth here. That was it. And you know what? They were great nights. We still had a lot of fun. Then the next week we had 4. Then the next week we had 7. Then the next week we had 9. I'm like, okay, we're growing in multiples here. Then we had the summer camp, and I went to the summer camp for 2 weeks to help out there. I just made an open invitation to a lot of the coaches and volunteers and stuff. Why don't you guys come out? We're going to have a pool party. And we went to the Malloy's house. The poor Malloys. 21 kids showed up that night. Not once did I preach about God. Did I share the gospel? Did I tell them what they were doing was wrong or right? All I did was show them love and show them that I cared. I started building relationships, so we had 21 out. Last Friday, we had 13 youth come out, sorry. I include myself in those youth, so that's why the 14. But we had 13 youth out. And does everybody know what we did last Friday? We played something called Fear Factor. Some of you might have seen the show Fear Factor. Some of you might have heard of it. Some of you maybe never. Ask the youth today some of the stuff that I got them to do. You might be interested to find some of the answers. You might want to fire me for some of the answers that they say too, but we had a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. We did a lot of different things, and they were excited about it. And I can guarantee you that if I do another Fear Factor, they're going to want to invite their friends out. I believe sometimes the most effective way for us to share God's love is to love other people. And they start saying, why does this person love me? I didn't do anything to deserve their love. And when they start asking that question, that's where we want to be. So my challenge to you guys this week, just because I really like kind of giving out challenges, is I want you guys to think about what can we do to start focusing on Christ on a daily basis. What are things that you already do, and what are things that we could be doing to begin focusing on Christ? And I encourage you that as you think of these things and as you come up with ideas, come and talk to me, because I'm actually interested to see what you guys come up with. So different ideas, different things, but just start thinking, how can we be focused on Christ on a daily basis? Can you stand as we worship, please?